this is actually the last panel of the day for our first day of the Career Symposium. Thank you for joining us. We have a great panel to talk about careers in science communication and science policy. This is an incredibly diverse set of careers that we couldn't possibly fully represent in 4 people. You can see the panelists laughing too. But we have chosen some that we know represent some of that spread. And so I'm excited for you to hear from them today. I will say that unfortunately, Tyrone, who is working at the NIH on the policy side, let us know that he has to be a few minutes late. So he is on his way. He'll come in, but he's just running behind. So I'm very excited to hand it over to my colleague, Ulli Klenke, who's going to moderate this panel.
Thank you, Laura. And I'm really excited to be able to talk on this panel with everybody because I'm really excited to learn more about your positions too. And for now, I'm joined with McGuire, who is the head of medical writing at MapLight Therapeutics, and Raechel McKinley, who is the science policy manager at the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. And right on cue, Tyrone came into the picture. You're the next on my list for introductions. Tyrone Spady, who is the division director at Science Policy Coordination, Collaboration and Reporting, that's a mouthful, Office of Science Policy at the NIH. And then lastly, Shana Spindler, who is a freelance science writer. And I agree with Laura, we have a very broad spectrum of wonderful positions, and I am really looking forward to learning more about what you are doing in your jobs and how everything you've done before translated. So I'd like to give you first an opportunity to introduce yourselves, and it would be wonderful if you could mention a little bit about what's your current role and giving us a brief summary of your career path within that. And I'm just going to call on you. Raechel, you want to get us started?
Sure, I'm happy to get us started. So I'm so happy to speak to you all today. My name is Raechel McKinley. I'm a senior science policy manager at the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, also known as ASBMB. A little bit about me, I'm an anatomist by training, but prior to starting my role, I actually was a member of ASBMB. My research aligned more so on cellular and molecular neuroscientists. Maybe halfway through my PhD, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to go into academia. One of my close friends, she came to DC. I went to Howard for my PhD. She came for a Hill Day, and she came to speak to her congressional members with her science policy group at her institution. And I met with them and I learned a little bit more about what they were doing. And I thought it was, really cool, really interesting. And so I decided this was something I kind of wanted to start at my own institution. So I started a science policy organization at my graduate institution. And me, alongside my the friend that got me interested in science policy, we started a HBCU science policy college tour to educate and train students at historically Black colleges and universities in the field of science policy. We both attended HBCUs for undergrad and graduate school, and we didn't necessarily see that as a possibility of a career choice. And we also saw a lack of diversity in the field. And so we wanted to help bring more diversity in the field by really looking to those institutions that we know are really leaders in diversifying the STEM pipeline, but not necessarily in science policy. After I graduated, I did a brief internship at the Union of Concerned Scientists in science misinformation and disinformation before joining ASBMB. A little bit about my day-to-day role. So I do a couple of different things. So I help track different legislative efforts. So any type of legislation that we think may harm or help the scientific enterprise, we monitor those bills or legislative activity. We also help to support our members. So we're a member-based organization. So we help to tie our members to different federal agencies. So whether there's different funding and training opportunities, or different helping them with their career path. So we have an advocacy training program that I manage, and we help to train our members to learn a little bit more about science policy and advocacy. And so that's just a little bit about what I do. I also do a couple of other things that I'm happy to chat with, but I'll give someone else a chance to speak.
Thanks so much, Raechel. Yeah, that was already a huge breadth of things that can be done in the policy and science communication realm. Mac, why don't you go next?
Thank you. So my name is Mac McGuire. I am currently the head of medical writing at MapLight Therapeutics. After getting my PhD in neuroscience, I did a postdoc about 2.5 years with the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease at the labs out in Hamilton, Montana. Very interesting experience, and confirmed that my suspicions that academic research wasn't going to be for me. And, medical writing was always one of those things that I'd kind of had in the back of my head. And, thinking back, I'd enjoyed writing my dissertation, which I know isn't the experience for a lot of people. But I enjoyed putting together, large documents and communicating, the science to a wider audience. So I had a colleague that was a medical writer at a CRO called PRA, and they had an opening. She suggested that I apply, and I've been doing medical writing since. Started out at PRA, moved on to several other companies that was more of a kind of service provider to pharmaceutical companies. And then a few years ago, about 5 years ago, I made the jump to pharma companies, and I've been doing that since. I've worked for large pharma, small pharma, and I really enjoy the smaller kind of biotech startups. And in my current role, I get to not only do some of the writing on important documents that go to the FDA and other health agencies, but I also establish some of the process that we use and, kind of determine what's the best way to put a document together and kind of manage that process.
Thank you so much for sharing. Shana, why don't you talk next, especially since you're doing something completely different, or maybe not as a freelance writer?
Yeah, every freelance writer does something completely different. There are no two same freelance writers. So I also got a PhD. Mine was in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. And I kind of just want to set the stage for why I'm a freelance writer. So my husband is an officer in the U.S. Air Force. And originally I did go into the sciences thinking I was going to be a tenure track professor. But when your family moves every 2 to 4 years, that is not a great career path to go down. So really out of necessity, I needed a career that could move, because this was pre-pandemic. People weren't necessarily working remotely. We've now been a military family for 20 years. So I really needed a career that could move around the country. So I ended up doing a postdoc at NIH. So I know many people in this Zoom meeting probably are NIH fellows. And I ended up at NIH because my husband was stationed out here in Northern Virginia. So it was the same reason I ended up at where I went for grad school. I applied to every single graduate program I could around every Air Force base he could possibly be stationed. So a lot of my story is out of necessity. My decisions were made to, make sure I could keep doing something. So anyways, I ended up at NIH. It was literally the best thing that could have happened to me. Anyone who is a postdoc at NIH, you have the world at your fingertips. You have so many opportunities available to you. So while I was a postdoc, I was at NICHD, and I knew not only did I have to be able to move around the country with my career, but I also knew I didn't really want to be at the bench anymore. I knew that as a graduate student. My committee convinced me, no, do a postdoc, don't close doors. Whether that's necessary is up in the air, but I'm happy I did it because it got me to NIH. And so I wanted to try writing. And I went to the Office of Education at NICHD. So, every institute, some of them have their own Office of Education. I went there and I asked, is there a publication I could try writing for to see if I like it? I had started my own little science blog Some of you might be familiar with Ed Young. I'd read something written by Ed Young. I was like, oh, I want to try this. So I asked, is there something I could write for? And the answer was no, there's nothing. And I had recently joined the NICHD Fellows Committee. And together we decided, well, why don't we create our own publication and then I can write for it. So we got permission to create this newsletter for NICHD Fellows, and I became editor-in-chief. And I began assigning myself writing assignments, and that worked out really, really well because I got a lot of experience. And by the time I had finished my first year of my postdoctoral fellowship, I wasn't going to renew it. At that time, I was pregnant with my first child, and I had an 1.5-hour commute each way on the metro. So I wasn't renewing my fellowship, and I was going to have to stop working on that, but they couldn't find someone to replace me as editor-in-chief. And when my fellowship officially ended, they reached out and asked if I would come back on as a contractor. So that is how I got into science writing professionally. And I think you're going to probably hear this story over and over, that someone started something because they were interested in it, and then it just snowballed into something else. So I began freelancing, and I started as a sole proprietor. And then over the years, I eventually created a single member LLC, which is what I work through now. And just over the years, I added different contracts. Some of them were just one-off experiences. Some of them I've been working with the same people for many, many years. And over the past few years, it really snowballed, and I'm actually doing really full-time hours as a freelance science writer. A lot of freelancers you'll meet keep it more of a part-time job. I personally think that freelancing is great for part-time. It is incredibly challenging to freelance full-time, especially if you're doing it with multiple contracts. So I'm actually now in the process of becoming an employee at the NIH as a science writer. So maybe next year, if I come back here, I can tell you the differences between freelancing and being an employee somewhere. But it's been an amazing experience. It has given me a ton of flexibility. I'm happy to answer questions about what it's like being both a part-time freelancer and a full-time freelancer. I did it part-time for about 10 years, and now I've been doing it full-time for about 3-4 years. So there are big differences between part-time freelancing and full-time freelancing. So I don't want to take up any more time. I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you so much, Shana. And I think it's really interesting to see also, like the differences of, like part-time and full-time freelancing, but also in terms of what Mac was just describing in terms of what he does in terms of the pharma and clinical writing or medical writing in that regard. Tyrone, what are you doing?
Figuring out how to unmute myself. Okay. First of all, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this year's Career Symposium. The Career Symposium has played a really foundational role in my career because I was involved in the planning of it when I was a postdoc during my last year at NIH. So super excited to be able to come back and be on this side of the dynamic. I have a PhD in evolutionary biology from the University of New Hampshire, where I studied cichlid fish. Folks know about cichlids or tilapia. Right. Really cool system, lots of phenotypic variation in genetically and evolutionarily closely related species. We didn't have the best in the way of genetic and genomic resources in the cichlids. And the canine genome was just sequenced around the time that I was finishing up. So I jumped ship and went from fish to dogs. NIH has, I came to NIH to do my postdoc at the National Human Genome Research Institute, where one of the folks who led the effort to get the canine genome sequenced has been now for the last, however long it's been since I was a postdoc. But it was while I was at NIH, I was fortunate enough to be awarded an intramural postdoc fellowship, which gave me my own money. And I took that opportunity to do some career exploration. While I was passionate about science and learning, I was also interested in a million different things. And didn't see myself as being on sort of the hamster wheel of continuously seeking grant funding. That wasn't something that was exciting to me. As I mentioned, part of my journey of exploration was getting involved with the folks at OITE and diving into, I probably planned the equivalent of this panel for that year's career symposium, and really, was working to understand the lay of the land and the opportunities that someone with my education and background might have. I also was looking for any and every opportunity I could get to have sort of administrative experiences away from the bench. So I organized an NIH staff art show, which was a ton of fun. That was my first experience sort of navigating a complex government bureaucracy, and it was much more complicated than you might think. Just have some food and hang art on the walls, but it was more complicated. Toward the end of my time at NIH, I was able to arrange a short-term part-time detail for myself. This was a direct result of Francis Collins, who had been the director of the National Human Genome Research Institute, and he was sort of in this weird in-between space before he ascended to be the director of NIH. And during this period, he was technically a visiting scientist, and his office was next to our lunchroom. And so he was very generous with his time and connected me with the folks at FASEP. That turned into a detail. I didn't burn down the place. They hired me for my first gig at FASEP. I started as the Federation of American Societies for Experimental Biology, one of the largest umbrella organizations of scientific and professional societies in the life science biomedical space. While at FASEP, I first focused on science policy issues, NIH related science policy issues, conflict of interest, the balance of the NIH portfolio, things like that. Ultimately, an opportunity came up to do more legislative advocacy and lobbying work. So I transitioned into that, which gave me the opportunity to work in support of the National Science Foundation. And USDA also has a small competitive grants program compared to NIH, that is. So I got to, do some work in different agency spaces and engage with different sorts of scientific colleagues and their supporting communities. That was great. That the exposure to that broader community then became sort of a platform for me to go off and run my own advocacy shop for the American Society for Plant Biologists. I'm not a plant biologist by training. I hadn't had a plant biology course since I think the sophomore year of undergrad. But it was great because I had experience advocating for the agencies that the society cared about. So I did that for 6 years, organized a congressional exhibition of federally supported ag research to kind of draw up attention and get members engaging with scientists and talking about the value and importance of ag research. That was a great experience and community building, working across different entities and working on the Hill. And as a result of that experience, I was recruited by NIH to come and do some sort of community building here. So I've been at NIH since I think 2020 or 2019. It's all kind of a blur. I came back as the division director for science policy coordination and reporting, and it is a mouthful even after saying it for 5 years. My responsibilities in OSP, the Office of Science Policy, are sort of twofold. One, I manage strategic coordination of NIH-wide engagements. Those engagements span the National Academies contract. We run the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellows Program for the agency. We coordinate engagement with the White House, all the various National Science and Technology Council committees that NIH staff serve on. the establishment of public-private partnerships with the Foundation for NIH. So a lot of those types of things. In addition, we also have a portfolio of emerging policy issues. Right now, that's focused on scientific integrity, which has been kind of big in the news over the past several years, particularly with everything going on with pandemic origins and those sorts of issues. But we also have worked on the use of animals in research, and specifically non-human primates. At the beginning of January, I actually left OSP. So I'm currently on detail in the immediate office of the director, working with NIH Principal Deputy Director, Dr. Lawrence Tabak, acting currently in a capacity as a senior advisor for him. Essentially, I have three responsibilities in this position. One, running his personal office, providing staffing support and standing in for him when necessary, and also working on special projects on support of Dr. Tabak and the NIH director. And that's where I am in a nutshell.
Thank you. That is all of you do so many amazing things, and it's very clear that communication is to the heart of it, but also the policy side and engaging the community outside of science. And I think that is what makes it so interesting in these careers. So you talked a little bit about your role, and you talked a little bit about how you got there. But what does your day-to-day look like? I mean, we all have ideas of what that might look like. But could you give us a little bit, like a very quick, what does, not every day, but a general day would look like? And Mac, you want to get us started on that one?
Yes, thank you. So my day-to-day involves quite a few different things, and I'm a medical writer, but most of my job is not actually writing. It's I'm not just sitting down in Microsoft Word and typing away. It's a lot of project management, working on multiple documents at a time, and as well as working with cross-functional members of our organization to develop documents. So the documents I work on are clinical study protocols, clinical study reports, and then submission documents that go to the FDA and other health agencies throughout the world. These often take months to author, and a team of 15 to 20 different people coming together to put their piece into that document. So it's organizing and managing all of that process. I'd say in a given week, 30 to 40% of my time is spent actually on a document. The rest of it is project management or working with my cross-functional team members.
Thanks. Raechel, how does your day look?
Yeah, so my day is not exactly the same every day, but I usually start my day off with really seeing kind of what's happening. So I really kind of check the news, see what's happening, to see is there something that we need to respond to. So oftentimes with my job, we submit comments to federal science agencies through what are called requests for information. I see Tyrone smiling. So a lot of times I'll check to see if there's anything that will pertain to our members, that if there's any policies changing at federal science agencies that maybe we want to respond to. After usually I check to see what's going on, I spend a lot of my time writing, actually. So I'm writing a good amount of the day. So if it's either a comment letter or I'm writing a position statement, like I said earlier, I track different legislation. So if there's a bill that we think, oh, this may, help most of our members are basic science researchers. Oh, this is something that we need to track, and we may put out a position statement in support of that bill. So it's a lot of writing, a lot of project management also. So we do put together different programming for our members. So we have different webinar series related to public affairs, policy. So helping to helping other members of our staff put together those events. Or for instance, there's National Postdoc Appreciation Week coming in September, so we plan different events for that. And so it varies, but on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of collaborating between departments, staff. We also do different congressional outreach to different members of Congress. So sometimes, we reach out if we, may have certain concerns, or to build different relationships. We also, for instance, now we're busy planning our Hill Day. So each year we have a Hill Day where we bring our members to the Hill so they can advocate for different asks that we, may have as a society, and to share that, and as well as their research with congressional members. So it's different each day, but a lot of communicating, a lot of writing, so very heavy in writing, I'll say.
So really aptly named, right? Science communication.
Science communication, yes.
Shana, how does your day-to-day look like?
I think since most people here are probably interested in getting into science writing and are not established freelancers, I'm going to answer that question of what my day-to-day used to look like at the beginning, and then I'll explain how that's changed over the past 14 years. So when I very first got into science writing, like I mentioned, it was part-time, and I did see there was a question, what does part-time versus full-time mean as a freelancer? I'm merely talking about the number of hours I spend per week doing this. In the US, a typical full-time week is considered 40 hours a week. But when I started out, at the very beginning, I was doing maybe 10 hours a week. I was only working during my son's nap time. He didn't nap, so that was, it was I was squeezing it in. But then that, slowly grew to like 20 hours a week or so. And I basically, when I was working part-time, I was working about 20 to 25 hours a week. So what did that look like? A lot was spent writing. When you're a freelance writer, that's what you are. You are writing. If you're not writing, then you're probably interviewing somebody to get quotes or to get background information. There is quite a bit time spent doing just like reading and doing background research on what you're about to be writing. But the majority is you're sitting there writing. What that looked like for me was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that was always full. I was either trying to pull my hair out from the right or from the left, like very, very typical, like you see it in a sitcom writer, like that's what my life looked like. Sitting at the kitchen table writing. So in addition to that, in the very beginning, I was also looking for additional writing opportunities. And I should clarify, there are many types of freelance writers. I am a person who ended up establishing my career doing mostly contract writing. So I have long-term contracts with my clients, and I've been working with them for years. It is not necessarily like a pitching situation. I'm not pitching Discover Magazine. I'm not pitching Scientific American with story ideas and then writing an article and then, done, move on to the next thing. I have established client relationships and we've been together for years. So I think it'd be great in future years for this panel if we could get like a freelancer who does that like traditional pitch a story and you're writing for the magazines, because that's a totally separate part of freelancing that I haven't really done. But because I sort of got into this by setting up contracts, I was at the beginning looking for more contracts. So some of my time was also spent going into like Science Writers Association jobs boards, seeing if people were looking for writers to come on board. So that was part of it. And then there is the administrative part where you spend time creating invoices, following up on people to make sure you get paid. That's actually a pretty big chunk of time is just your admin. And as so that's what it looked like as a part-timer. And then as I started growing, the looking for opportunities turned into fielding opportunities. So once my name got out there and people started hearing about me, I started getting contacted like, hey, can you come work on this project with us? Or are you interested in this? And so evaluating like what I wanted to put my time toward also took time. So that became part of my day. And I also started doing science writing where I would attend large conferences and I would help write the conference report at the end. And so then part of my day might be going to a full day conference. So every day is completely different. Like it is just completely different. When it turned more into like 40 hours a week situation, week to week, month to month could look completely different. And this is like, I really caution people about going into freelancing where if you want to be working full-time hours, because at least in the way I'm doing it, where you have multiple contracts that you're trying to juggle, it can be very challenging if you have 7 contracts at once and all 7 of them need something at the same time. And I used to call it my 7 contract pileup. I've learned now how not to get myself in that situation. But a month when I'm in a 7 contract pileup could be like really, really challenging. And it's just, you're just working all the time. You're constantly trying to manage, like, what do I have to do? Like, you learn how to prioritize very quickly. Anyway, so days like that could look hectic, and it can be really, really, really trying. And spent mostly writing. So yeah, I feel like I could talk for like 3 hours about this, but someone else should.
But thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing to the opposite of how it used to be when you were like sort of starting, and how now you're actually on the other side and you have to sort of also push back on certain things, and how your day-to-day is actually changing. Tyrone, how does your current day-to-day look like? And I know you talked about how you're doing multiple things, and where you are right now. So
Sure. Sorry. Okay, gotcha. A lot of time in meetings. I live on Zoom. I also am probably at this point in my career doing less writing and more managing the work outputs of other people, as well as coordinating our subject matter experts across the agency to respond to things. I'm also sort of evaluating info for Dr. Tabak. So I'm sitting in on meetings that he can't attend and figuring out if the outputs or topics that are discussed are things that sort of rise to the level that he should be made aware and perhaps take action on. A lot of project management, which I think I heard from one of the other panelists. And I'd say lastly, managing the work of the team. So making sure work is distributed, making sure Dr. Tabak has everything that he needs if he's going to be speaking at commencement. Does he have our slides ready? Does he have talking points? And just making sure that those things are handled. It's sort of the day-to-day. But yeah, tons of meeting, tons of emailing people. And now that I'm more in the physical space than I have been when I was with the Office of Science Policy. Building 1, the NIH leadership, largely as part of the Office of the Director, is housed in Building 1. And a lot of these folks are actually coming into the office in some instances 5 days a week. So it's very easy to actually just walk down the hall to talk to someone. So I also spend a lot of my time kind of traversing the corridors, chatting up my colleagues on various things.
Thank you for sharing that. So I love how you all outline what your day-to-day looks like. Now I would like to know, and I've seen questions to that regard. Like what are some of the formal and informal skills that helped you reach and succeed in the role that you're in? And like maybe you can. I'm sure there was lots of skills that helped you there. Maybe you can give us your top 3. And Shana, you want to get us started?
Time management, hands down. As a writer, you have to meet deadlines. Like it's just that's not an option. If you don't have good time management, just forget it. It's more important than being able to write. But for real, like I've also done editing And every time, if I need someone to write something for a publication that I'm working on, I'm going to go to the person who I know is reliable above the person who's the better writer. Every time, because you need the writing done. And things can be edited, but you know, you need it turned in. So time management is huge. Just being able to be friendly. I don't know what that skill is called, but just being nice to work with is incredibly important. Being able to take constructive feedback. If someone doesn't like something you've written, being able to not take something personally and saying, oh, okay, I see you're making this better. Here's how I can change it. Those are the top two. And then, you know, in there working on your writing skills, like it's in there, but it's not more important than those two. Just being reliable and being nice to work with.
Thank you, Shana. Tyrone.
Yes, I would echo Shana's comment, writing. And that's really, you know, whether or not your career is formally in the writing space or not, the writing is sort of training you how to think, and it also, to be effective at it, you have to understand your audience and make sure that you are writing for them and not for you. And I think that making that transition and beginning to think about your communication in that way is super important. And also, I mean, Shana basically answered everything. Yet time management and organization, figuring out how to organize your work so that you're able to stay on top of and juggle multiple competing tasks.
Shana, sorry, Raechel, would you agree on that one?
I would. I would also like to add to that, being able to network and build strong personal connections with people, specifically in policy and advocacy. A big part of the job is relationship building. So you're talking with people, other times trying to build relationship with congressional members. You want them to see you and to know, oh, we can go to them as a resource. You want to position yourself. So that means you have to talk to someone. I like to talk and kind of how Shana said, to be friendly, to be someone that's kind of approachable, right? It's an outward facing position where you're talking and mingling with people all the time. And what's another thing? Another skill that I would like to say. I would just really being organized. And I think that kind of goes in with time management, because you're working on several different projects at the same time. And if you don't have good time management skills, things will fall off of your plate, and you don't want that. You don't want to be in that position. So you really want to find the best the best method for you to be organized. And that looks different for everyone. Everyone has their different things. Your organization is also going to have the thing that they use to keep organized too. And so making sure that the way you organize your schedule, your tasks, making sure that that fits in with what your organization or company, whatever they use. I think those are really important skills.
Meg, is that the same in medical writing?
Yes, I would agree with all the panelists saying that organization, time management, being able to collaborate with cross-functional teams, people that from different organizations is critical. That's something that's been very helpful. And I think for me, more on the science side, one of the things that I found very helpful as a medical writer is all of my background in bench science and research has helped me understand all of the different studies that I've been involved in and how to communicate that effectively. I've worked across a lot of different therapeutic areas with different pharmaceutical companies, and being able to, understand why they're doing the studies and what the endpoints and objectives of those studies are, is really helpful in communicating that to different health agencies. So, kind of that more scientific side, being able to understand the data and the purpose of studies is also very important.
So there's a lot of questions in the chat asking about what could someone do who wants to enter this field? What should they be doing right now? What could they do during their PhD or during their postdoc to become, like somebody, a company, or like people who hire for science communication and policy, making them attractive? Maybe one of you wants to start.
I can start. Oh, well, oh, okay. I would say first, if you see someone that's doing a role that you could possibly see yourself in, I would say reach out to them. A lot of people are very willing to do an informational interview. I do them all the time. A lot of people like doing them. I know I don't mind doing them because I did that when I was starting out. I would just look on LinkedIn. Okay, I would look and see what they're doing their day to day, kind of doing research on people. And I thought, oh, okay, I could see myself doing this. And so I would reach out to people and to see a little bit more, and kind of doing what you're doing now. You're here, you're at this panel, you're getting a deeper insight into what these careers look like. Another thing I would say, and it's something that a couple of other people along with myself did, is kind of carve your own way. If there's something that you want to do and it's not being done, don't be afraid to do it yourself. And that's something that really makes you attractive. I think someone did ask in the questions, and I may pop back up, about if you need a fellowship. To get into policy, I didn't do a fellowship, but I did start my own thing. And I kind of carved my way into the science policy world. So there are other ways of doing that. And I didn't do a postdoc either. So if you want to do something, you can kind of make your own way. So I would say, if there's nothing there, if you don't see anything out there, start it yourself.
Tyrone, did you want to go next?
I think Raechel did a great job.
So from the freelancing end, or even if you want to become employed as a science writer in the type of science writing that I do, which, by the way, I don't even know if I said my science writing is geared more towards like the lay audience. And I write actually a lot for Congress. So I'm not writing policy, but I am writing with policymakers as my target audience. Anyways, write. That's what you can be doing right now. Just write. It doesn't matter who you're writing for. Write for yourself, write for your friends, write blogs, write whatever. But if you can, write for something that is going to be published on a website, preferably like an NIH website. There are so many avenues to get into science writing if you're at the NIH. The Catalyst accepts postdocs, maybe even graduate students as writers. I'm not sure, but for sure, I think the NIH Reporter might. But there are all these really great publications at NIH, and if that scares you a little bit, just start at your institute. If your institute has an Office of Education, go to them and ask, is there something I can write for? And exactly what Raechel said, if there's not, just make it. Like, just do it. There's nothing stopping you guys. Like, there are so many opportunities, and you just got to make your way. And if you don't find any, then make them. It's totally possible. I did not get a degree in science writing. I have no formal training in science writing. I only have a scientific training with my PhD, and everything I learned by doing it. And it's totally possible.
Tyrone, you want to go next?
No, I think the ladies have done an excellent job of providing some great advice. I don't think there's anything I can add.
Mike, go ahead. I saw you unmuted.
Yep. I would agree with both Raechel and Shana that just write as much as you can. Doesn't matter, who the audience is, but having some examples of your writing and that you can communicate complex topics is very important. I think specifically for medical writing, so my audience is typically health agencies, clinicians, being able to communicate that is important. And one of the organizations that I always refer people to is the American Medical Writers Association. They have a lot of information on medical writing, the different types. You can be publications, you can do clinical regulatory writing, which is more toward FDA and health agencies. You can interact and network with medical writers. There's a freelance and contracting section there. So they also provide some certification and training. If you want to kind of break into the field, having that on your resume can help set you apart from someone that may not. So I always recommend AMWA.
Those were wonderful resources and ideas of what people can do to enhance their abilities already now while they are training to either become a PhD or like in their postdoctoral training. Another question that I've seen multiple times is like, how does that work-life balance look like in your positions currently? It sounds you're all very, very busy people. How do you make that work?
I would love to take that one if I can. All right. So I think over the course of your career, you probably, in the beginning, you are super anxious and excited for any opportunity. And so you take on as much as you can and maybe sacrifice your personal life sometimes. I've learned over the years of the importance of sort of developing personal boundaries. And in the last few years, I've actually taken up amateur racing. So that requires quite a bit of time in the way of training. And it means that when the day ends, I have to go somewhere to train with my racing team, and I communicate that to the people around me so that that's an understood expectation. But that balance and that contrast of going out and biking for 50 miles is a great alternative to, sitting in meetings all day. So I think, if you are forthright about what your needs are to the people around you, in the same way that you probably make accommodations for your colleagues if they have to, go get their dog or something like that, that people can also do those things for you. I think it works best when it's reciprocal and everyone is looking out for everyone. But yeah, I would encourage you to start early with carving out space for yourself, because ultimately you're the person that has to live in this life. So you might as well make something that works for you.
So I can chime in as a freelancer. I just can't imagine any better thing for work-life balance. And it was pretty incredible being able to turn up how much work I was doing or turn it down a little bit, depending on if we were PCSing, which is military speak for moving when you get restationed to a different duty base. So if we were moving from Nevada to Virginia or wherever, it was very, very handy to be able to adjust how much work I was accepting or, even looking for at any given time. So freelancing is amazing for work-life balance. It's great. Now, a downside, actually, something Tyrone brought up made me think of this, is that you're kind of a solo actor. You're not part of a team when you're a freelancer. You've been hired to do something. You're the doer. You're providing a product to somebody. And if you get sick or something happens and you're the one responsible for turning in this product, it's not like you have a team member with you. It'd be like, hey, can you do this? I'm not feeling great, or, whatever. It's you. It's all on you. So that's something to keep in mind. It's actually one of the biggest reasons I'm transitioning from being a freelancer to joining an office, because I really miss that team environment. And I really miss having that where you're part of a core group and, you can help other people. They can help you. You're all, sort of working towards the same goal. So that's something to keep in mind. If that's something that's really important to you, when you're freelancing, you are a solo actor. but your solo actor has total control over all of their time.
So I'll say with me, I think I have a pretty good work-life balance. I do tend to add certain things to my plate, but I'm mindful of what I add. So there are things that I want to do that I know that would help my career, but there are also in things that I'm very interested in. And I think that if you make sure that it's something where it's really kind of like, you know, like a baby of yours, then it doesn't necessarily, you're still working, but you're doing something that you really love and that you're passionate about. And so it doesn't make it seem like you're working oh so much. And I will say, from transitioning from grad school to, being in this position, my work-life balance has also increased because it's 9 to 5. And there are, depending on what time of year it is, I am working more hours, but for the most part, it's 9 to 5. I don't have to, do experiments from the morning I wake up to late in the evening or anything like that. So, but I also think is kind of what we were talking about with time management. So being able to know certain things as a priority should make yourself a priority. So I think you should always have something that you do at least once a week that you do for you. Like Tyrone said, he has a hobby. Have some type of hobby. Do something that you love to do. And it doesn't have to be something too big or too time consuming, but to actually have something that you make a priority that's for yourself, not for anyone else, not for work, not for your family or friends, for you. And I think that really helps in creating a good work-life balance.
Mick, you want to chime in?
I would love to. So I think in kind of the regulatory medical writing space that I'm in, your work-life balance depends largely on which company you work for. I used to work for Merck during the pandemic and the vaccines and infectious disease group, so it was very busy, and my expectations were 55 to 60 hours a week just to meet the minimum expectations. I had a team of several writers that I was managing, so my expectations were a little higher than some writers. That led to burnout fairly quickly. That's just 2 years of that kind of work can really weigh on you. So I've decided to move on to smaller companies where generally the work-life balance is better across the board. There are times when you have to do a lot more work than you may want to, but there are also times when it slows down and you can kind of take that time for yourself and really enjoy life a little bit more than when you're working so much. Smaller companies that I've had experience with typically offer unlimited PTO and encourage you to take it, which can be nice. If it's going to be over 2 weeks, you just have to get approval from your manager, and I have never seen any issues with that. So, but like Raechel said, I think finding something that is important to you that you enjoy doing outside of work and committing some time to that can really help with the work-life balance.
Yeah, without that healthy rest, without that finding your creativity out there, how can you be creative at work, right? So it's really important to have that work-life balance. And thank you for all your suggestions and talking about what you've done. So now I know that this is a question that is on everybody's mind, but it's always usually hard to ask. And I'm just going to put it out there. So what is the expected range for a starting salary in this career path? And I'm not talking about the salary you have right now, but rather that somebody, or like when you started or when somebody would start in that realm, what could they expect in the environment where you are working? Go ahead, Tyrone.
Yeah, I think probably in the range of 60 to 85, 90 is a reasonable range for someone starting out in science policy. I think whether or not you have experience, this assumes a PhD. If you have experience, some kind of fellowship, that does increase the salary that you can command for your first full-time permanent position, but somewhere in that space. And it varies whether that's government or working in a scientific society or a university or a lobbying and consulting firm. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Shana, what does a freelancer make as a part-time and then as a full-time?
Man, this is a really complicated question because there's different ways that freelancers get paid. So one way is you pitch a story and that particular publication pays per word. And that per word can really range from 25 cents a word to $2 a word. It just depends on the publication. It really, really varies. Usually you can find that information if you go to like a science writer conference. Sometimes they'll have editors from the publications and they'll do sessions where they talk about what they do per word. I mean, you can get the information somewhere. Another way that freelancers get paid is if you have a contract with somebody and then you invoice hours. So you keep track of how many hours you spend working on a particular piece of writing. And then when you're finished the writing and it's turned in and everything's done, or maybe monthly basis, if you're doing this over the course of a long time, you send invoices. And man, the National Association of Science Writers, I think just put out a publication that talks about what freelancers typically charge per hour. And I don't know if it's entry level, but it ranges across different types of writing. There's government, and it ranges a lot, like a lot, anywhere from like 30, 40 an hour all the way up to 200 an hour. So it's really like dynamic. I think what they said for government, and we're talking about NIH, I want to say for government, the average was like 90 an hour. Don't quote me on that. National Association of Science Writers has a publication that talks about this. And then a third way that you can get paid is by saying this project is going to cost X amount. It doesn't matter how much time I spend on it. It's going to be turned in on this date and this is what it's going to cost you. And I have not done a project in that way, but I imagine just like everything else, it's probably hugely variable and depends on the publication that you're giving it to or the organization that you're giving it to. But if you are, so that's freelancing. If you're going to go into science communications, the type that I do, and let's say you want to work at NIH, I want to say like with your PhD, you can probably start around GS-12, something like that. And in that case, it's similar to what Tyrone was saying for science policy in terms of what you can expect for compensation. But yeah, it's across the board in science writing. Sorry, I couldn't be more.
No, but I think it's actually really good to know because that means you actually really have to do a lot of research in terms of like how can you bill your hours, and that isn't as clear cut as like a regular position. So there's more to it than just writing and getting somebody to write for. Now you also need to sell your services. So
yes,
thank you for bringing that up.
It's really important to note as a freelancer, you are not getting benefits from a company. And you have to think about that when you're thinking about compensation, because compensation is not just your salary. It's also if you're getting healthcare, if you're getting matching contributions to a retirement account, paid time off, sick leave. I don't get any of that as a freelancer. So not only do I not get that, I'm paying extra in taxes. I have to pay twice the Social Security tax because I'm paying my portion and the employer's portion. So these are things to think about. If you're going to be self-employed, like compensation is not just the salary, it's all those other things too. I don't get paid time off. I don't get sick leave, none of that. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Thank you for sharing that. Mac, real quick, because we're getting towards the end of the panel.
Yep. I'd say, from what Tyrone said, that's pretty standard, I think, for medical writing as well. I would expect someone, entry-level position with very little to no experience within regulatory medical writing to be making 85 to 110 at the top end of the range.
Thank you.
As a base salary.
Yeah. And Raechel, what would you think?
The same range that Tyrone said. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So we are almost at the end. There's only 1 minute left, but I would love for each of you to give us maybe in one sentence, what would be advice you would give to somebody starting in this career?
Be tenacious. Just be tenacious. If you want it, find a way. Everyone's path looks different. Yours does not have to look like anyone else's. You don't have to have some formal degree to do something. Just be tenacious and go for it. That's what
I would say be persistent. Medical writing is kind of a hard thing to get into. There's a lot of demand out there, but no one wants to hire, very few people want to hire someone that doesn't have any, real world experience with medical writing. So be persistent.
I'd say there's no shortcut for the work of sort of sitting down with yourself and figuring out exactly what ticks for you, where you want to be. So that's not a program. That's not, anything like that. That's you sitting down with you.
And Raechel?
I would say try and do something that you love. I love what I do. There are parts of my job that, may be difficult, but I love what I do. Try and find something that you love. It's very rewarding, and I would just say go for what you're passionate about.
Well, I thank you for these wonderful advice that you're giving everybody, and for being on the panel today and really, teaching us a little bit more the details of what you're doing within the science communication and science policy world. It's been wonderful to listen to you, and I personally learned a lot myself. So thank you for that. And I think we answered quite a lot of questions from the audience. And as you heard, audience, reach out, have an informational interview with our speakers, and talk to them directly, ask your questions, and generate that network that you also will need to be able to succeed in this this profession. So thank you so much for this. And it's raining here in DC. I hope you're gonna go into a nicer weather right now. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. And Laura just came on. So thank you.
I'm not going to add anything other than to say thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you all.
Have all a good rest of Tuesday afternoon.